This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. It's Tuesday today, which means we're doing a top 5 list, and the topic under discussion today is that of supergroups. You know, these kind of musical collaborations that come along every now and again where you get a bunch of well-renowned musicians, all famous in their own right, glittering career of well-respected work under their belt, and they get together to create something of a joint nature, and quite often it works fantastically well. Often, it has to be said, only for 1 or 2 albums maybe, and then it fizzles out. But, you know, in at least one case on this list today, you know, there was an entire body of work that kind of came forth from that. So that is the topic we're talking about today. My top 5 favourite supergroups, beginning with
Asia.
Yes, indeed, Asia. Now, I got to confess that when I first heard this band, I didn't know they were a supergroup. I didn't know that, you know, Jeff Downes had been a member of the Buggles, no less, and one of the incarnations of Yes. And you had Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, John Wetton from King Crimson, and Steve Howe from Yes. I didn't know that this was, you know, the kind of backstory of the band. I just knew that this was an album that was continually being played on the cassette player in the college dormitory where I was living at the time, and it really got under my skin. And, you know, I mean, Heat of the Moment, Only Time Will Tell, you know, all of those great songs off that album, which escape my mind at the moment, but I was listening to it just the other day. Yeah, fantastic album. I bought that first album and subsequently found out who these musicians were and what the backstory was, and that there'd been quite a buzz in the progressive rock, you know, kind of fraternity about this, you know, this collaboration between members of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, King Crimson, and Yes, you know, and there'd been this kind of hype in the build-up to this collaboration, of which I knew nothing. I just knew that I liked the album and went out and bought it, and then subsequently went out and bought later releases, and I always thought, yeah, it's not quite as good, is it? But, you know, in terms of, you know, supergroup collaborations that produced an absolute belter of a classic album, then no list would be complete without that first Asia album. So that's why it's on the list. Next.
Bad Company.
Yes, indeed. Bad Company. Again, not a band that I really remember the whole kind of hype leading up to this, because I was, you know, I think, 1973, 74, thereabouts, when it all kicked off. I was like 6 or 7, so you know, around about that time I wasn't really paying a lot of attention. I discovered them subsequently, and, you know, Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke from Free, Boz Burrell from King Crimson, and Mick Ralphs from Mott the Hoople. You know, so a lot of well-renowned musicians all coming together to produce something that was greater than the sum of its parts. And, you know, this is what I meant earlier when I said that, you know, a lot of these bands, you know, they do one album and one decent album and it fizzles out. But, you know, Bad Company certainly had the longevity, and there is, you know, to this day, I think a version of them still knocking about, isn't there? You know, I think there's just Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke original nowadays, but don't they have Howard Leese in there on guitar as well? He used to play guitar in Heart at one point. But I just love this kind of stuff. You know, it's radio-friendly, blues-based hard rock, and, you know, it puts a big grin on my face. So, again, that's justification enough for this band's place on the list. Next.
The Winery Dogs.
Yep. Now, this is a fairly recent band, the Winery Dogs. A few years ago now, possibly getting on for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I forget. It kind of happens when you get to this age. But anyway, Sky Arts, the TV channel in the UK that tends to broadcast a lot of the big rock festivals, like I think it was probably Download or High Voltage or one of those kind of big rock festivals. You know, they said, and, you know, the announcer said, and now let's go over to whatever stage it was for the set from the Winery Dogs. And I thought, well, who's this? And I thought, I recognise that. That's Billy Sheehan on bass. Didn't know who the other two guys were. Big power trio they are. Basically, Billy Sheehan on bass, We know who Billy Sheehan is. Obviously, I first got to know of him from Dave Lee Roth's band, and wasn't he in Mr. Big at one point as well? And then you got Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater, and Richie Kotzen, who I first got to know of back in, I think, the early 90s, in the sort of fag end days of the band Poison. But I think he was also in Mr. Big. I think he replaced Paul Gilbert at one point in that band. Anyway, what are they all about then? Well, as I discovered from watching this performance on TV from I think it was the Download Festival, what have I written down here? It's bluesy, hard, shreddy rock. You've got Billy Sheehan, who is, a bit of a shredder as a bass player, and Richie Kotzen, who is very much a shredder as a guitar player. But they're doing like really kind of accessible, again, radio-friendly, kind of classic bluesy rock, and boy, does it work really well. Interesting thing about this band was that they were originally going to be called Bad Apple, and Richie Kotzen was sort of a latecomer to the whole project. It was originally going to be John Sykes on lead guitar vocals, so that would have been interesting. Yes, so there you go. That's Winery Dogs. I think they only did 1 or 2 studio albums. I think there's a live album knocking around as well. But if you're not familiar with them, then like all of these bands, I'm going to put links down in the description. Well worth going and checking out. So there you go, Winery Dogs. Next,
the Travelling Wilburys.
Again, now this is a band that I very definitely did know were a supergroup. I was listening to the radio one Saturday afternoon in the early 90s, I think it was. No, late 80s even. I think it was 1988. When I kind of 88 or 89. Again, my memory of the timeline is a little bit fuzzy. But anyway, I heard this song come on. It was called Handle With Care, and I'm thinking, is that a Roy Orbison song? Sounds like him singing. Well, no, hang on. Sounds like Bob Dylan now. And no, that's not Bob Dylan or Roy Orbison. That's that bloke out of ELO, Jeff Lynne. So I was hearing all these voices and thinking, I couldn't make up my mind who it was by. And then the announcer, I think it was Richard Skinner, the DJ on Saturday Sequence on a Saturday afternoon where they used to play this kind of stuff on Radio 1 back in those days. He announced that there was this new fantabulous supergroup called the Travelling Wilburys that consisted of George Harrison, Roy Orbison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne. And I thought, oh, yes, indeed, I'm going to have a little bit of that. And I think they did like an interview. I think they had Jeff Lynne in talking about it, and he was just talking about how the whole project came about, and just how they all kind of got to know each other and all the kind of backstory to it. And it was really interesting interview. And, I just thought, right, yes, indeed, I've got to go out and buy that. I think I went out and bought the album on cassette. I think this might have been just pre me owning one of them newfangled compact disc players back then, but definitely went out and bought the album and still listen to it to this day. So no mention of fantastic supergroups is ever going to be complete without mentioning the Wilburys, so that's why I've mentioned them. Next,
Derek and the Dominoes.
Yes, indeed, Derek and the Dominoes. I would very definitely include this in any list of supergroups. We tend, I guess, to think of Derek and the Dominoes as being little more than an Eric Clapton side project. He was tired of the whole Clapton is God kind of stuff, and he wanted some anonymity. He wanted some way of kind of hiding in a band, even if only it was a bit of a conceit. But no, it was I think a genuine supergroup, because you had, as well as Clapton, you had Bobby Whitlock, who played with Sam and Dave and Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, along with Carl Radle, again bass player from Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. You had Jim Gordon, the drummer from, or one of the drummers in the notorious LA session outfit called the Wrecking Crew. Very good documentary on those, which I can highly recommend as well. Just go and search on YouTube or somewhere for that, which is called the Wrecking Crew. And then of course you had Duane Allman, who was only sort of very briefly in the band, but he made it onto the album. He made it onto Lail and Other Assorted Love Songs. And I've waxed lyrical about this album many, many times in past videos, and I think I'll spare it again today. For me, it's the best thing Clapton's ever done, and it's certainly just, it adds up to something greater than the sum of its parts, which is, all of these supergroups, you hope that they achieve that. It's all very well having, a lot of great musicians coming together. And one supergroup that I was considering putting on this list, but the album just wasn't that good, is if anybody remembers Little Village. You had John Hyatt, Nick Lowe, Ry Cooder, and Jim Keltner, I think. I think that was the lineup of that. So, a good pedigree there, but the album just didn't really kind of do much. It certainly didn't do much for me. So sometimes, it can be a little bit of a damp squib, but with Derek and the Dominoes and the Travelling Wilburys and the Winery Dogs and Bad Company and that first Asia album, everything came together really fantastically well and just, gave us some classic music, I think. So there you go. Those are my top five favourite all-star supergroups. Let me know what yours are in the comments below. I'm kind of genuinely interested to know what you guys come up with, and you usually hit upon one or two suggestions that I thought, well, why didn't I think of that? So feel free to tell me where I've gone wrong in the comments. You usually do. And that is pretty much it for today, folks. Hope you've enjoyed the video, found it entertaining in some small way, and if that's the case, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so. And why not give me a like while you're at it? Don't forget, as always, the live stream every Friday 5 p.m. UK time, where we drink beer and talk about music and guitars. A great way to kick off the weekend. I'd love to see you there if you could make it. But for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.